5-second pause.
Hello everyone. What a great occasion for the 40th anniversary of the Land Trust Alliance.
To celebrate the enormous accomplishments and influence that the Land Trust Alliance has had on land conservation throughout America in the past 40 years.
LTA's steadfast work to accelerate the pace and permanence of land and water protection.
40 years of great work to support land trusts at the local, regional, and national level across the U.S.
So it was 40 years ago that leaders of land trusts from around the country gathered at the Lincoln Institute with this audacious idea that they could work together and get more done.
Just getting together and sharing ideas and sharing energy and enthusiasm and finding that community.
I personally have known LTA, which I like to call you, since the days of the exchange.
We've come a long way from the first rally in 1985. This is actually from 1990 rally.
We did an extraordinary job of setting the base for the full Land Trust Alliance programs of today.
But it's also evolved into an organization that's truly committed to elevating its positive impact on people, on climate, and on diverse communities.
We are so fortunate with the people who have made this their mission in life.
You are the voice of the conservation community. Feel free to borrow that.
People who are so dedicated and caring and smart. They see the future and they'll do almost anything to get there, but they bring people along with them.
To the Land Trust Alliance, just want to express my gratitude for all of the work you do to build community in the field of conservation.
And for providing practical support that ensures that we're protecting land at the highest standard.
I'm impressed with how Land Trust Alliance is adapting and growing to assure the land trust community is relevant in a changing world.
It's been tremendous, and it's really helped my leadership, it's helped my organization be more effective.
And that's been a tremendous gift for me as a person, but has also resulted in the conservation of over 7,000 acres here in northern Utah.
Wonderful, wonderful people, both on the board and staff levels, and the memories will be with me forever.
And I hope the pace of land conservation continues and all of our good work continues.
I'm really proud of that collective impact.
We need to keep that, and we need another 40 years of being a voice for the land and a voice for the people that use the land.
The old African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We've been together 40 years. The stars are going to guide us for the next 40.
Well, I'm proud of what we accomplished, proud of the Land Trust Alliance.
We celebrate you. Keep up the good work.
Happy anniversary.
Congratulations on 40 amazing years.
Here's the next 40 years.
Congratulations, and thanks again.
Thank you so much, and cheers.
Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to Rally. I am Elizabeth Ward, and I am the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for the Land Trust Alliance, and it is my pleasure on behalf of all of my colleagues at the Alliance to welcome you to New Orleans, Louisiana for our annual National Land Conservation Conference. In addition to the Alliance's 40th anniversary, I'm celebrating being back at Rally in person, our 35th Rally, and we have a great 2 days of speakers, workshops, and more to look forward to. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of what historically was an indigenous trade hub on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bulbancha, a place for diverse cultures to come together. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the native peoples that have lived on this land since time immemorial. Before we get started with our opening plenary, however, I'd like to direct your attention back to the video monitors for a brief message from the United States Senator for Louisiana, Bill Cassidy.
United States Senator Bill Cassidy here, and it's great to be with you virtually for the 2022 National Land Conservation Conference. For 40 years, the Land Trust Alliance has helped land trusts across the United States protect the places people love. In Louisiana, we have experience with conservation. We know the importance of preserving natural resources and the environment we rely on. Since the Land Trust Alliance established the Independent Land Trust Accreditation Commission, You have made a lasting impact on the communities and the land around us. Americans like you have preserved more than 60 million acres across the United States through private land conservation. In my state, land trusts have protected nearly 499,000 acres of land, an increase of almost 50% since 2010. The Land Trust for Louisiana worked here in Orleans Parish to preserve land and has done so all the way from what we say the Bayou to Bossier, that's northwest Louisiana. Since 2004, the Trust has preserved more than 10,000 acres in Louisiana, including a 140-acre stretch of land between Lake St. Catherine and Lake Pontchartrain. Your work has made it possible for we in Louisiana to enjoy our environment and all that comes with it. In our state, the outdoor recreation economy generates more than 50,000 jobs and has added $5.5 billion to the total outdoor recreation economy. Now, Congress is doing its part to provide you the resources you need. There's $492 million in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Coastal Resilience Fund grants. A mouthful, but you get it. Millions to apply for. And land trusts can apply for those grants to support land conservation along our coast. It will go far in making coastal communities more resilient and restoring coastlines. I also supported the 2018 Farm Bill, which in turn supports land conservation here in Louisiana. And I will continue to work to make sure that private land conservation programs, like the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, continues to be adequately funded as Congress reauthorizes the 2023 Farm Bill. We will keep your priorities in mind and work to make sure that that 2023 Farm Bill reflects the values of this land conservation community. I wish you success in your work to conserve another 60 million acres by 2030. If there's any way my office can help in your mission, contact. And in the meantime, have a great conference, spend lots of money, support my local economy.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. I'd like to take a moment to also thank our sponsors for helping to make Rally 2022 happen. The Nature Conservancy and the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. The Nature Conservancy is a global environmental nonprofit working to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends by boldly addressing the biodiversity and climate crises, and is proud to work with partners like you and the Land Trust Alliance to create a world where people and nature can thrive. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service keeps working lands in working hands by providing tools and resources to conserve and protect critical farmland, ranch land, and forested lands across the nation. The USDA NRCS accomplishes this by working hand in hand with land trusts and other partners, and we are grateful for your support. Also, thank you to our generous patron supporters, along with our benefactor supporter and our scholarship sponsors, whose names and logos you can see on the screens behind me. To all our sponsors, our lead, to our patron, to our benefactors, to our supporter, and our scholarship sponsors of Rally, please join me in expressing our collective appreciation. Thank you, too, to our 2022 host committee for all their help, including the wonderful field trips in advance of Rally. And finally, before we get started on the real fun this morning, I'd like to share some highlights from last night's welcome dinner. First, I'm pleased to share that Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust in Massachusetts received the 2022 Land Trust Excellence Award. Mount Grace is a brilliant example of how a land trust can become a more engaged and invested leader in its community, can incorporate Indigenous input into stewardship plans, and can develop partnerships built on mutual trust and respect for the land. Congratulations to Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust. Second, the Alliance was honored to join the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy in presenting the Kingsbury Brown Conservation Leadership Award and Fellowship to Ebony Alexander, Executive Director of the Black Family Land Trust. Ebony is a leader, a pioneer, and an innovator. She has been the driving force behind innovative program and state policy changes in support of landowners who have historically been overlooked. She also serves on the board of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative and currently sits on the board of Virginia's United Land Trusts, a coalition of land trusts in Virginia, as well as American Farmland Trust. With this award and fellowship, Ebony will continue to inspire us. Thank you, Ebony, and congratulations again. Farm Bill conservation programs implemented by the U.S. Department of Agriculture are the largest single federal source of funding for private land conservation. These programs create significant tools and opportunities for land trusts to protect high-priority farm and ranch lands, grasslands, wetlands, and forests. They also provide matching funds to conservation partners so that federal investments go further to protect America's working lands. We are proud to work with USDA on these programs, as well as the land trust community, to ensure these funds are going to where they can best help farmers and ranchers improve and expand activities that benefit natural resources. I'm pleased to introduce a brief message from Dr. Jewel Branagh, Deputy Secretary of Agriculture at USDA. Dr. Branagh is the first Black woman and woman of color to serve in this position. Prior to joining USDA, she was appointed Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services in 2018 by Governor Ralph Northam. In spring 2019, Dr. Branagh launched the Virginia Farmer Stress Task Force to raise awareness and coordinate resources to address farmer stress and mental health challenges in Virginia. And in the fall of 2020, she helped establish the Virginia Food Access Investment Fund and Program, the first statewide program of its kind to address food access within historically marginalized communities. And now, please direct your attention to the video monitors for a brief message from Dr. Branagh.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak at the Rally, National Land Conservation Conference. While I wish I could be with all of you in person, I couldn't miss the opportunity to thank the Land Trust Alliance for all of your hard work. As we unite to celebrate the ways that all of us can work together to protect and conserve our national lands, it's fitting that we meet in New Orleans, Louisiana, a place known for its resilience and creativity. Because creative problem solving is a strength, we are all going to have to collectively flex if we're going to make a positive difference in protecting the land that we all cherish. That's why conferences like this one are so vital. They bring together a diverse collective of experts, enthusiasts, and earth lovers to use their knowledge and skills toward a common goal, the goal of saving our planet. And while that is no small task, I am confident that those of you here today will play a crucial role in finding a solution. I want you to know that USDA is a proud partner in these efforts. Recently, we've made several announcements about our ongoing commitment to land conservation. In August, we announced that Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, is awarding $197 million for 41 locally led conservation projects through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. RCPP is a partner-driven offering that leverages resources to advance innovative projects that address climate change, enhance water quality, and address other critical challenges on agricultural land. NRCS also will invest up to $12 million in partnerships that expand access to conservation technical assistance for livestock producers and increase the use of conservation practices on grazing lands. Those proposals for the Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative are open until September 22nd. So I encourage all of you to take a look if you or someone you know may be interested. USDA awarded $50 million to 118 entities for 2-year projects that expand outreach, and we will continue to build upon this effort to reach new producers and landowners. USDA NRCS funding has helped the Land Trust Alliance directly as well. Because of our additional support, you were able to offer over 60 stipends to Black, Indigenous, people of color, and underserved conservation practitioners, many of whom are in the audience here today. These are just a few of USDA's recent conservation efforts. On the heels of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, our nation's largest ever investment in combating climate change, the Department of Agriculture now has even more tools to continue this work, to which we have long been committed. Our work to implement the Inflation Reduction Act will include delivery of additional funds through the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which I know is a top priority for the Alliance. We will also work to ensure this additional funding for our conservation program support our equity efforts and reflect the administration's work on Justice 40. As Deputy Secretary, it is my great honor to hear the stories of people like all of you, those working on the front lines to make a difference for your families, your communities, the American people, and our planet. Thank you for all you do to increase the pace of conservation and to enhance the quality of efforts being done by your partners, members, and volunteers. On behalf of USDA, I want you to know that we are here to support you in this important work. Please know that we are proud to be a resource to you. Thank you for having me, and best of luck on a successful and productive conference.
Thank you, Dr. Branagh. In 2006, the Land Trust Alliance created the Land Trust Accreditation Commission as an independent program to build and recognize strong land trusts and foster public confidence in land conservation and the work that land trusts engage in. The commission is comprised of an incredible team headquartered in Saratoga Springs, New York, and it is my pleasure now to introduce the commission's executive director, Melissa Calverstrand. Melissa joined the commission in 2009 and was named executive director in 2020. And throughout her tenure, she has overseen the accreditation review process and facilitated the accreditation decisions for as many as 100 applicants each year. As executive director, Melissa has leveraged the successes of the accreditation program and of accredited land trusts to advance the commission's next phase of work, which includes building the strength of land trusts, growing public trust, and engaging with land trusts in new ways to improve their return on investment in the program. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Melissa Calverstrand.
Thank you, Elizabeth. 2022 Rally is a very special occasion. Not only are we all gathered together in person again, but it is the 15th time we are celebrating Land Trust accreditation. Over those 15 years, you've cheered, waved your pennants to recognize each other's work, as well as to recognize all that the Land Trust community has been able to accomplish through the accreditation program. Today, the accredited Land Trust community is comprised of 461 strong, resilient land trusts, united in their commitment to land trust standards and practices. And since Rally 2021, 15 land trusts have achieved first-time accreditation. I want to tell you a bit of their stories, after which we can join together with a collective cheer. These 15 land trusts are in 11 different states and stretch from coast to coast and engage in their communities in truly special ways. from the Okanagan Land Trust that has protected more than 13,000 acres in north central Washington. They recently celebrated World Fish Migration Day with their community as a tribute to the work being done to protect the critical habitat of both salmon and steelhead. To the Greater Lovell Land Trust that has protected more than 5,200 acres in Maine. They've engaged their community with some citizen science to find the biggest trees on their own land or land trust property. These 15 land trusts protect a wide range of landscapes and resources, including farmland and ranch land. The San Benito Agricultural Land Trust and its partners recently celebrated the permanent protection of 540-acre ranch in California that will allow for the continued cattle grazing as well as partnership with the Ama Mutsun tribal band to provide access for ceremonies and native land stewardship. Sustainable Iowa Land Trust protects farmland that grows nature-friendly food. I actually spent a week with my family biking across Iowa this summer, and I was really impressed by the vast landscapes of corn and soybeans and wind turbines, and really appreciated how critical these lands are to renewable energy, healthy food, and clean waters. And land trusts are working across the country on that direct challenge of clean waters. Captina Conservancy protects Captina Creek, which it measures as having some of the highest water quality in all of Ohio. The Walloon Lake Association and Conservancy in northern Michigan was formed when a lake association and a conservancy joined forces in a shared mission of protecting water quality and connecting people to Walloon Lake. The Mid-Michigan Land Conservancy recently partnered with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources on a Forest to Faucet initiative to help protect the state's drinking water. Payette Land Trust started an initiative to create a connected corridor along the North Fork Payette River and is helping to protect the Little Salmon River watershed. These efforts to protect water quality, allow for water access, and help conserve the existing beauty in Idaho. Accredited Land Trust works to protect special places and unique places across the country. The Desert Tortoise Preserve Committee in California is focused on protecting critical habitat for the desert tortoise and other desert species in the Mojave Desert ecosystem. To date, it has protected over 7,000 acres with an acquisition of almost 300 parcels. And one of the proudest achievements of the Greenbelt Land Trust of Mid-Missouri was the protection of 102 acres of old Missouri forest and the largest remnant tallgrass prairie in its area. The property is being used to provide the public with hands-on experience with prairie restoration. The Philander Chase Conservancy in Ohio was formed in partnership with Kenyon College to help protect a 373-acre nature preserve and protect the farmland and rural nature of the entire community. Collectively, accredited land trusts protect nearly 6,500 miles of trails. The Island Heritage Trust provides public access to the shorelines and islands of Maine to allow for launching of boats, fishing, clamming, picnicking, and recreation. And 11 of its properties provide free public access to water. Sheridan Community Land Trust in Wyoming has built over 22 miles of hiking, biking, and equestrian trails as part of its efforts to connect people to land and history. Conservation takes people working together and with their communities, but doubly so for those that are led and run completely by volunteers. The Open Lands Conservancy of Chester County in southeastern Pennsylvania works to protect wildlife habitat and provide access to open space in a region with high development pressure. And actually right across the Delaware River in New Jersey, the similarly all-volunteer Rancocas Conservancy has protected 2,000 acres of land in the Rancocas Creek watershed. By joining the body of accredited land trusts, you are helping build and safeguard the public trust in land trusts and in land conservation across the country. So those of you who are here today in person from those 15 newly accredited groups, please stand up so we can all congratulate you with a round of applause to celebrate your achievement. Again, Congratulations. And since last rally, 63 land trusts have achieved renewal of their accreditation. These land trusts are based in 29 states and have collectively protected more than 2.9 million acres. In many ways, it's been a tough 3 years since we last gathered at Rally. It's been a time of uncertainty and change, but time and time again, I personally have seen land trust rise to the challenge with innovation, a renewed commitment to their mission, and to connecting people to land. Renewal of accreditation helps strengthen a land trust. It's an investment in your policies, your procedures, and core infrastructure that is critical to ensuring your land is meeting the promise of perpetuity. So each time we celebrate accredited land trusts at Rally, we are celebrating each one of you too, whether you are in your second year of being accredited or your 12th. So please give yourself a round of applause. Accreditation is something to be continually celebrated because it is a continual commitment to the standards. It is not a one and done thing. So while we celebrate here today, we are also celebrating you throughout Rally. Come visit our exhibit, grab a sticker version of the iconic pennant because everyone loves a sticker, take a picture at our photo booth and share it out, write a message of congratulations, and talk to the people who make up the commission. Because accreditation is not possible without the dedicated volunteer board members who donate thousands of hours every year because they believe high standards and excellence matter. And behind them are a professional staff team, staff who are here on hand at Rally, but every day to answer your questions. Over the past year alone, staff has had over 500 calls with land trusts to support you, so you can put together your best application and help tell your accreditation and your land trust stories. Because we don't see accreditation as a one and done thing either. We all come to Rally to connect with conservation-minded people, be inspired by new ideas, and go home renewed enthusiasm for the collective work that we do. And I hope you know that every day I am inspired by each one of you. I look forward to talking with you here at Rally and celebrating with you at all the rallies to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you to the entire accreditation team for your outstanding work, and congratulations again to the newest class of first-time and renewed accredited land trust. And now it's time to bring our panel up on stage. This is a new format for us, and we're excited to have a group of panelists who bring a variety of experiences and perspectives to the issue of more inclusive land conservation outcomes. Today's panel will be moderated by Gale Spears. Gale served on the Land Trust Alliance's Common Ground Advisory Council in 2019 before joining the Alliance's Board of Directors in 2020. And she currently serves as chair of the organization's program committee and is also, I'm happy to say, a member of the Strategic Communications Committee. Gale is a past board president of Solano Land Trust in Northern California, and we're extremely excited to have her here to moderate this impressive panel of guests as they discuss the larger role that private land conservation can play in more inclusive land conservation outcomes. And with that, I'll pass it to Gale to introduce our panelists. Please join in welcoming them to the stage.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I wish you all had this view. I have never seen more happy faces in one room. This is truly a blessing. So in the spirit of 100% authenticity and complete transparency, I want to let you all know that I am not a conservationist by education. I grew up with a dad who was a gentleman farmer on 10 acres in Northern California. My dad loved three things. He loved his God, whatever power you want to call it. He loved his family, and he loved the land. I am a conservationist by love, legacy, and experience. Thank you for welcoming us. So over time in Northern California, if you all know that area between San Francisco and Sacramento, our landscape has changed quite a bit. And there was a long time that I thought I was one person rolling around believing that everything was changing and no one else is noticing that it's changing. I was literally isolated, believing no one cared about the land except for me. So cows are my happy place. Cows on a green landscape is my super happy place. So there I was, conservationist of one. I didn't even know I was a conservationist. Every now and then I'd run into like an old farmer in our community and connect with him. We'd talk about what was changing in our landscape. Thought, well, at least I have one or two people to talk to, and there we were. We were a group of two, sometimes three. And about 12 years ago, I met my local land trust. That is the Solano Land Trust in Solano County, California. I realized, oh my gosh, lo and behold, we have a herd. And then I looked up and I see this herd and I'm thinking, it just doesn't get better than this. Being in a room of like-minded people, headed in a way that I don't think we've ever collectively decided we were all gonna head together. Now, sometimes some of us will turn a little backwards, you know how that happens. But we are that body that will allow conservation to be the landscape of this nation and of this world if we stay committed to our messages, if we stay committed to the land. And that's the one thing I always see, no matter what your face looks like, no matter who you are, no matter what part of the country you came from, we have the one thing in common. It's that stuff we walk on. They're not making any more of it, and we all want to preserve it. So thank you for embracing me into the herd. Happy to join. Thank you for having us. My local land trust led me to meet the Alliance. And then the Alliance led me into a room such as this and to sit on a stage with these amazing panelists. You're going to have an opportunity today to hear from Mavis Gragg. You'll hear from Gabe Sheoships. And I have to mention to you that Gabe and I did not coordinate our outfits. We just were trying to wake you up or either blind you this morning. And I think we're doing a pretty good job because you all look pretty awake. And we will also hear from Rocci Aguirre. These folks are going to bring their thoughts, their experiences to you. This is a slightly different format for us for a plenary. There's so much richness in these three chairs, I just don't want you to miss it. So if you needed coffee, go and get it, hurry back, don't be long. Because you're going to hear from three amazing conservationists from various corners of our country. We are so blessed to have them with us. The way this will work is that each of our panelists will make about a 5-minute statement, give you some general remarks, and then we're going to drill down a little bit more, ask a few questions. If you see me making notes, because we want to get some questions in there and want to make sure we can drill down deeply enough for all of you. So with that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Mavis. And Mavis's work has really focused in on, she's an attorney, and her work has really focused in on real estate ownership in the Black community to help build family and intergenerational wealth in the Black community. So I'm going to turn it over to Mavis.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, and similar to you, Gail, my foray into the conservation space, the green conservation space, has been only 6 years. I am a land conservationist, but as you mentioned, from a legal perspective, working with families who need legal solutions to support intergenerational ownership of their land. And at the same time I launched my law practice, a death and dearth law practice, I also joined the board of a local land trust, Triangle Land Conservancy, and it really, go TLC, you're gonna hear a lot about TLC TLC now. But it really did open my eyes around a few things, in particular in innovation in conserving land and partnerships in conserving land, and then also the significance of history. My photos are not related to what I'm saying, except that these are people who are very important to me in spaces where we enjoy the land. So innovation, what is it? So I'm pretty sure we all have a definition of innovation, and I like this definition because it's very useful in application. Innovation is the process of creating value by applying novel solutions to meaningful problems. And what does this look like? So for a land trust like Triangle Land Conservancy, which serves 6 counties in a hybrid urban-rural area of North Carolina known as the Triangle, they've identified 3 problems in the region: rapid loss of farmland, land retention barriers, and lack of land ownership by African American, Latina, Indigenous, and Asian communities, and also unattainable land prices or leases that don't provide equity for those who are seeking to grow their own food. And TLC's mission is to create a healthier, more vibrant Triangle region by safeguarding clean water, protecting natural habitats, supporting local farm and food systems, and providing access to outdoor recreation. And so I love that TLC looked at what their mission is, but also what these problems were, and then made a connection to, their belief that every single person in the Triangle cannot be reached without actively working to end systemic racism, which for centuries, of course, has led to ongoing inequities to access and enjoyment of the outdoors. And so they identified these meaningful problems directly connected to their mission as a nearly 40-year-old organization. And I will say, as a former board member of TLC who likes governance, who likes plans, it's comforting to know that Triangle Land Conservancy thought strategically about its mission and how these problems must be addressed. And so what they determined that they needed to do was use their conservation tools to increase land ownership, retention, and economic opportunities for people of color at prices unaffected by development potential. The Good Ground Initiative, which you may hear about later in the conference, basically uses a buy, conserve, sell model to land protection and equity promotion in the agricultural space. So essentially, TLC or conservation buyers are acquiring real estate that they then place an easement on, so it's permanently protected, but then they're selling it to farmers of color in our community. And because the TLC is able to reduce the prices, it makes it more accessible, and these families can begin building their intergenerational wealth, begin having a solid place permanently for feeding their community, feeding their families. So why is innovation important to a land trust? I think it really depends on your land trust mission and the problems that interfere with achieving your mission, and it may not be obvious on the surface, but I do suspect that doing the same things in the same ways is not going to work for most land trusts going forward. And so I like this example for TLC because they recognize that the development potential in our area is a threat, not only to them, but also to farmers of color. And so the potential impacts of this particular initiative are tremendous. But innovation, of course, requires or benefits from partnership. And so I'd like to talk about partnership because I will say in my 6 years in the green space, I've learned a lot about partnership. I think we can easily take for granted what that word means. And partnership really is a spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum, it can be just communicating with one another as an organization and sharing information. Another TLC example is this program they have called Wild Ideas, where they invite lots of people from the green community organizations to share about what they do in the same place, and invites the whole community to come in and learn. So they have a theme for each Wild Ideas. Maybe it's clean water, maybe it's bees, but it's bringing people together and sharing about all of the work that we are doing in the community. There's also partnerships that are bridging gaps. And that may not be as deep as transformative work, but it is allowing organizations who perhaps don't have the same resources, use the resources of other organizations to achieve their mission. So again, another example, using TLC as another example, is TLC has 3 properties permanently conserved, fee simple, that they have allowed other groups, mostly BIPOC groups, use to farm, to grow food, to teach people about farming. And this is a deeper level of partnership, and I would say when you get to this level of partnership, it definitely requires trust and relationship building. And TLC has learned through a lot of conversations, sometimes about chickens, sometimes about whether it should be a license or a lease, but have learned, I would say the hard way, that when you engage in this level of partnership, you have to have trust first. You have to have a relationship first, and I can't overemphasize that. And then, of course, there's partnerships that are transformative, where you're necessarily going to change the course for a certain issue. And an example that I love involves a conservation organization, a paper products company, and 2 nonprofit law firms. Basically, these organizations, pursuant to a report on heirs property, which is essentially family-owned land, jointly owned family land. Heirs property in Alabama and Mississippi was so significant, and the risk of parcelization of that land, essentially dividing that property up among family members, the risk was so big that it threatened these organizations' ability to permanently conserve family-owned forest. And so to that end, you had, again, a conservation organization, a paper products company, and 2 law firms, 2 nonprofit law firms, develop an initiative to provide direct legal services to family forest owners in Alabama and Mississippi so that they can keep their land, keep it whole, and keep it permanently protected. You know, I think that land trusts that are seeking to do innovative things to address these problems and seeking to develop new partnerships also have to look at the past. And I don't think we always like looking at history, so let's talk about history. All of the land that we conserve as land trust has history, and our organizations have history too. And some of this history is great, and some of this history is very painful. TLC has conserved over 20,000 acres of land through a mixture of easements and acquisitions. And one of their preserves, the Horton Grove, was part of one of the largest plantation systems in our country. This preserve, they also have a preserve that has a river upon which African American children had to cross just to go to school during segregation. And then yet another preserve that TLC was part of an interstate trail system used by Native Americans. So the history of these lands is necessarily now part of Triangle Land Conservancy's history. And so why is this important? I think that understanding history and using it to think critically about your organization's conservation efforts and then sharing about that history is important for land trust. I found that in the context of conservation, power dynamics, equity, and inclusion causes people to tense up and it feels really uncomfortable to dig into history, let alone share about it or act on it. But I think the past does inform the present and the future. And in addition to acknowledging the history of lands we're working with, the history can be used to improve our conservation efforts. There's an organization that I just discovered called the Critical Ecology Lab. And I love this message. It was founded by Dr. Suzanne Pierre, and I love this message from the Critical Ecology Lab. We practice connecting environmental measurement with intergenerational understandings and memories of a changing planet. We don't work with communities, we are the community. And so to that end, I want to say, Land Trust Alliance, we are the community. And this is really simple, but it's a very powerful statement. And my hope is that as Land Trust, you believe the same is true for your organization and you lean into that belief openly and completely. Thank you.
Mavis, thank you so much. That encapsulates so much of all of our work around DEI and inclusion in this space. We're now going to hear from Gabe Sheoships. And Gabe has been in the Portland area since the 80s, and he has worked building partnerships in Black and Indigenous communities, immigrant communities, refugee communities, and he does all of this to serve conservation in his area and the changing needs of his community. Gabe?
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Mavis. That's quite the act to follow. I want to thank you both and Rocci just for being here in your presence, and LTA for inviting me. And before I get too far, I've got a little bit of a frog in my throat. I spent a few days back in Oregon inhaling some wildfire smoke, so you can probably hear that a little bit. But Tots Mewi, my name is Gabe Sheoships. I am a Cayuse and Walla Walla from the land now known as Oregon. The work I'm going to discuss is focused on a 700-acre forest in midst the biggest city in our state of Oregon, and how we're reflecting that across 21 land trusts, many of whom are here today. So maybe give yourselves a round of applause through the work of the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. Yeah, be a little louder. Like Mavis, I'm relatively new to the land trust world. I spent the past few decades mostly as a fish biologist, working on how to restore our native fish, or what we know as our first foods, into the cultural ecosystem of Oregon, Washington, Idaho. It wasn't before too long that I realized that we needed more hands involved, folks that could actively move within the landscape, folks that own land, folks that own water rights, and folks that hopefully could come together for a bigger, broader picture, especially in light of climate change. So a lot of what I've heard in the past few days is really how do we find a balance between farming, between indigenous practitioners on the land, between logging, and our contemporary world. Because I think a big theme, and a lot of what I heard yesterday from Ebony Alexander is we need to find a balance, for the betterment of our world. So my work, as I mentioned, is twofold. So I'm the executive director of the Friends of Tryon Creek, which is a 52-year-old woman-founded organization located in one of the biggest West Coast cities, Portland, Oregon. It's also, I think, statistically, the whitest city in the nation. Many of you have been there, I say. And with that said, so as the executive director, I've stepped back into our organization and just realized the vast power that we have as facilitators of this 700-acre temperate rainforest, and taking a look at our audience and seeing who we're serving, who has access, really has power and privilege to come in and learn as a young person, and then hopefully take those lessons as they grow and become old, and really shift their life attention to thinking about conservation. So programmatically, I think that looks like starting with a comprehensive plan, a strategic plan that looks at who's being served, who has access to this place, and how do we grow that? So through my leadership, we created a strategic vision that was grounded through an indigenous worldview, really looking more at relationships, not quite encompassing the year-to-year, the grant-friendly data points, but looking with intention and looking to collaborate and facilitate entry to people, indigenous people, also Black peoples of color, immigrant refugee communities. And with that, we've been able to grow our stewardship base and our community base tenfold. Like many areas, we have people that have lived within a few miles of this forest and have yet to access it. So we really took that heartfelt to try to understand why. And through that, we created an internal culture that also models more of a relational worldview. We work closely with a group, Oregon State Parks, who now steward about 250 individual sites throughout Oregon. It's one of the largest state park per capita rates in the nation. And these areas are all important cultural sites for indigenous communities. So with that said, we work to remind our partners just the vast power that they have in accessing, facilitating, and telling the story of these lands. In my work, there was a little bit of teasing, because I walked into our nature center maybe 7 years ago, and I told them, I was like, it almost, looking at the narrative here in your timeline, your media, it almost suggests that this area just appeared maybe 170 years ago. So it was through that work that we connected with local tribes, Western Oregon tribes, Western Washington tribes, and a vast urban indigenous community to build collaborative programming that we call cultural ecology, that kind of balances Western science and traditional ecological knowledge. And this was the first culturally specific curriculum that we were able to produce, that we've since then partnered with Black communities in Oregon, other peoples of color, to collaborate on specific environmental and outdoor curriculums that were co-created. So facilitating ownership in this special place, which benefits many reasons. Having more stewards, more scientists, more biologists, and starting folks at a young age will benefit all of us. I think we all know that. And that looks differently. We've been able to transform our board, which had, when I started as executive director, had 0 peoples of color. And we've since transformed to about half. We've also looked at our staffing. Staffing is the greatest entry to change in an organization. Hiring and empowering young peoples of color, bringing folks in, setting a space so that they'll be able to thrive and retain and feel comfortable to do this work will only benefit your organizations. We've been able to kind of follow this track over several years. This work is a long way ahead. It's nowhere close to being done. But this is something just kind of stepping back that everybody in this room has the opportunity to do. No matter where you sit within your organization. Our organization, we kind of lessen the hierarchy. We work a lot with government partners, but we work to create a place where everybody has a voice, everybody has a potential leadership track, and we're really focused on empowering young leaders of color. So this very much relates to some work that connected a good chunk of the reason that I'm here with the Oregon Land Justice Project. And this is the power of collective action. And this is 21 land trusts, again, many of whom are in the room, and 1 soil and water conservation district, who have came together over the past 2 years to collaborate, to build momentum, to learn from indigenous peoples, and most recently to take a couple visits to tribal sites, culturally specific areas, powwows, to learn and be surrounded by indigenous people, which for many in our delegation, that was a very new experience. All of this with a long-term goal to better protect our natural lands, to build collaboration, to empower folks to work together. Many folks who, while working in very close proximities to each other, have had strained relations traditionally, or had long-term historical, less than positive relations. So our work, through the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts, has really taken this on. This is an innovative model that's based off some work back east in Maine and Alaska, led by a colleague who's not here, Peter Forbes. But this is a long-term endeavor. This is a project that has no end, where we're asking our partner organizations to lean in, to loosen some of their power, to share resources. We're asking folks to contribute to a fund. We're asking folks to take a look at their bylaws. We're asking folks to take a look at their internal organizations. And really this is innovative in that way. We also, step back and realize that many of our organizations have a ton of resources and economic power. And with that in hand, you can make a lot of change. Kind of stepping back to my organization, I like to say, humbly, if I could do this, everybody in this room essentially could do this work. And this work is, I think in a nutshell, I'm very appreciative of the land acknowledgement that was given earlier, but this is kind of putting the land acknowledgement into action. And continuously and for the long term, and the betterment of our natural spaces, and how we all move forward collectively to balance both contemporary needs, growth, but also kind of the long-term survival of our other living species and ourselves as humans. So with that said, I think I'll wrap it up there. Katsuyayo, thank you everybody.
Thank you, Gabe. I'm awfully glad that you mentioned long-term, because all of those people out there, they think about that every day. We are in perpetuity, all of us. So when we talk about long-term, we really mean long-term. We don't mean like 4 years from now or one more strategic plan down the road. So thank you for bringing up that point. We now have the opportunity to hear from Rocci Aguirre. Rocci has 27 years experience in this world of conservation. He brings himself as unique, different, and usually not in front of a crowd on a Friday morning. Rocci.
Thank you, Gail. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. When I was asked to be a part of this panel, what was important to me was really to touch on the spirit and the heart of what inclusivity meant, right? That to really give more sense and feeling and understanding to it than just stepping into some of the technical spaces that we inhabit as professionals. As Gail mentioned, I've been doing this work for 27 years. I've never done anything but conservation work. It's been an amazing journey. You are my community. I'm very grateful that LTA decided to start Rally with this open forum, to be a part of this, to see inclusivity, diversity on the front stage at the start of Rally. I can't tell you how powerful that is as a person of color who has spent my entire career in this world, to be on a stage with leaders in the conservation community that are people of color. As Gail mentioned, this is not how I typically start my Fridays at Rally, so didn't quite realize there'd be so many people here on a Friday morning in New Orleans, so thank you. I also wanted to tie together sort of some of the pieces that Gabe and Mavis had said. Sorry about that. Last night was a powerful night for me. I want to thank the people that were open about the discussions around inclusion at the Conservationists of Color Forum, at the reception there, the people that I got to speak to at the Northeast Alliance at dinner, or at the Northeast reception at dinner. I was inspired. I walked away from those conversations feeling like there were things that were happening at Rally that I had not felt. This is my 13th Rally over the last 17 years that I've been involved here. So to be here is powerful. It's important how we open up space for new voices, for new leaders. Those were the things that were important to me. What I tell you in 4 minutes probably won't capture enough of the pieces to sort of start a long-term conversation, but it's to acknowledge how powerful this moment is and what LTA is achieving just by opening Rally this way. COVID, this is the first time I've seen a lot of you, a lot of my friends in the past 3 years. We forget how bonded we are as a community together, how important the conversations that we start and have here. That is what makes this panel and this discussion meaningful moving forward. I would say if LTA wants to engage and make conservation more inclusive, to be more engaged in that space, you have to open up the space for new voices and new faces. If you ask me, there's two really critical pieces to that. One is to be authentic in your intentions. You have to be authentic in your intentions, and you have to be intentional in your approach, right? Like, it's not enough to just say we want to check boxes or put the right amount of presentations in front of you in terms of a conference. That intentionality and authenticity is something that as a person of color, we feel, right? Being in the Conservationists of Color room last night, there were conversations that only happen when you were talking amongst yourselves within your community. And that's important because that does come forward, that does translate into the work that we're all doing. So one of the really key places that I was asked to speak to were, how do we find more voices like that? So people that I feel like span boundaries, really have a foot in multiple worlds, can navigate different cultural experiences, articulate sort of those different cultural, be more articulate about the cultural awareness that's around them, really speak to the communities that they engage in. And I think that that is what makes the boundary spanner so critical to the success of being inclusive. It's about finding people who navigate very complicated places, whether it's within our communities, whether it's personal, whether it's in the work we do in the larger sphere. Conservation can't happen, it can't be inclusive if we aren't finding ways to elevate voices and find those people. Boundary spanners, the thing that makes them most important is their ability to communicate, is their ability to translate the world that they inhabit into something that's approachable. In the policy world that I now sit in, I would say that it's somebody who can take very complicated technical or academic research and translate it to a decision maker or a policy maker. Vice versa, it's being able to also have a foot in that world and bring back those really complicated political decisions that need to be articulated to academics, to stakeholders, to your members. That is the value of finding people that span those worlds. Typically, we tend to frame it in this discussion as a diversity issue, but that's not necessarily it. I had a wonderful conversation at dinner last night about somebody who I would truly consider to be a boundary spanner. They're white, they sit in a position of power, but the way they were able to articulate the way that they engage around conservation was powerful. It resonated with me in a way where I said, right, this is what we are trying to strive by becoming more inclusive. How do we achieve this? This becomes the big question, right? I would say that when we look at the most important thing that we need to do, it's touching on what Gabe had mentioned. It's how do we open up the job pipeline? When I first got involved with Conservationists of Color, that was the space that I wanted to engage around. That was what was important to me. As a professional who spent 27 years slowly working my way through the system, it's not, in that whole time that I've been working through a conservation career, I've had one person of color as a supervisor. That was 21 years ago. How we become and empower the jobs pipeline in a different way is something that we need to think about holistically as a movement. We can't create that conservation canopy if there aren't leaders at the top who reflect the communities that we're trying to engage with, right? And it's not just because we look the part, because we are the right color, we are the right, whatever flavor of diversity you want. It's because we bring those unique worldviews. We can span those boundaries, and we can really engage in meaningful ways, in ways that just don't exist in a lot of other contexts. So how do we do that? We need to retain the people that we bring on board. We need to mentor them once we have them. We need to prepare entry level for folks through the whole spectrum of the pipeline. I think that what you'd said, Gabe, was powerful. It's not just getting people in the front door. We're good at that. But you look around, there's more to this putting color into the room. It's how do you guide people from that entry level through the process, make them prepared to be the best leaders and the best professionals that they can be. It's not just advancing BIPOC and people of color or diverse candidates through your organizations just because of that diversity. It's usually they've been hired because they're the most talented and exceptional people that you can find for your organization. Making sure that we provide them the tools, the mentorship, the guidance to move them from entry to mid-tier, right? Promoting them as we can, opening up pathways to leadership. I don't believe we can become inclusive in the ways that we want to and that we need to without having authentic voices in leadership, right? Authentic voices who reflect the communities that we engage around. And it's not just the actual organizations that we run. It's not just stepping into that space to have 15 executive directors. It's how do we also influence the board structures, opening up ways that you can take talented people on your staff, all talented people, finding ways to open up pathways to board and volunteer leadership opportunities, and so that folks are trained to be and serve at the highest levels of what it is to be a leader in this in this movement and in conservation in general. I think that when we start to talk through and look at that jobs pipeline, it's not until you start to engage more fully that way. That's a much more larger organizational perspective. That's really sort of starting to look at how your leaders function, who those leaders are, and the experiences that they come to really engage your communities. To me, that's the spirit and the heart of inclusivity. That is where we're striving to as a movement. And it's not just that. If we don't develop that cohort of leadership, if we don't engage and find those people that can really start to build those networks within our communities, we just will struggle. We will still do meaningful work, right? You will still be role models in your community. The one thing that I've always been amazed at is how many role models exist amongst you. You are powerful people. I have been inspired by you for decades. If we don't build that larger cohort, though, that meaningful work, the disconnect between that which we think is important and that which can be transformational and truly change lives, that disconnect will continue to grow. And I think that's the true value of this conversation. That's the true power of having these people on stage. That is the power of what opening up Raleigh with this conversation is about. And that's why I gave up my Friday morning at Raleigh to be a part of this conversation, when I often say I'm not an expert on diversity. I'm just an expert on being diverse. Right? I didn't have a choice with how my mixed cultural and ethnic heritage. So my expertise, conservation. Diversity, it's just part of who I am. It's part of what I can share. It's the space that I've chosen to step into. And I welcome the opportunity to follow up and to be engaged more robustly throughout Raleigh, throughout conservation around these issues, and to be partners with the folks that are on the stage. My final takeaway is just, if we engage the way we engaged last night as the conservationists of color at that forum, finding allies, stepping into that space, that conservation canopy, that inspiring speech that we heard last night, you have people that reflect at the highest levels the really heart and root of what conservation is about. That, to me, is what inclusivity is about. That is what makes this conversation important.
Rocci, thank you so much. We have just a few minutes for a couple of questions, and so we're going to try to drill down just on a couple of things. Rocci, you mentioned boundary spanners. Tell us about how you look for those folks. How do you find those boundary spanners?
So I want to be really clear that boundary spanners, we tend to frame that as from a diversity perspective, right? We tend to think of people that are coming to you that are distinctly different. And I would say that that overlooks the truth of what a boundary spanner is, right? Somebody who really can bridge worlds and communicate that effectively. I say start with what you've got. Look inside your organizations. Understand the assets that you have within your staff. Just because somebody gets hired for one thing doesn't mean they don't occupy an entirely different space in other parts of their lives. If you really want to find the people who can resonate and communicate about what your mission and organization is, start with what you have. That's a very different conversation, right? If you're having staff retreats, if you're talking at staff weekly meetings, allowing people to inform what their experiences are and how that colors the work that they do. You may realize that you've got 10 boundary spanners on your staff, and if you've got a staff of 3, you might find that you have 5 on your board or volunteers that work with you. So start with what you have. I would also say that after that, cross-pollinate. Right? Look outside of your organizations for your allies and the stakeholders that you engage with regularly. People who know your mission, your vision. Start to look into those organizations and into that space, even if they don't have land trust or conservation skill sets. I had an amazing conversation last night at the COC reception about somebody that had come into the land trust world who was an exceptional professional at the work that they did, right? had no or little land trust experience, but that land trust was willing to bring that person in because they spoke with authenticity about the world that that land trust wanted to work in, spoke about that community that was important to the land trust work. So cross-pollinate, be willing to look outside of your comfort zones. I would say incentivize those opportunities for your staff to step into leadership roles in other organizations on boards. And when I say incentivize it, we incentivize health. Why not incentivize board time, right? Create stipends that allow people to have childcare if they need to go away for board retreats, if they need to be tied up on weekends. Those are practical things that you can do as an organization. Set up leadership training for the folks that you do want to mentor and move through your organization. Set up executive coaching for your executives, for the teams that are at the top that are making decisions, so that they become better at communicating and supporting the staff that are boundary spanners. Turn your executive team into boundary spanners if they're not already ones. I think those are sort of the initial, places to start. You have to be intentional about the process, right? You have to go into it realizing and being prepared that this is a messy and complicated space, right? No harm, no foul. Once you step into that, the conversation starts. There is no endpoint. There is no box to check. The value of this work is creating us to be better people and in turn better organizations and to better reflect our communities.
You mentioned intentionality. Mavis, can you tell us a little bit about being intentional and maybe a risk that you've taken in being, and we were very intentional about it?
Yes, maybe I'll project a bit, but I've joined Triangle Lane Conservancy's board 6 years ago, and at that time TLC had, I think, 12 staff members and a very ambitious vision. And as a fiduciary, as a board member, very sensitive to change, very sensitive to things that could, run afoul very easily without being thoughtful and intentional. And fast forward to 2022, I've already shared, this is kind of like a TLC infomercial, but fast forward, TLC has doubled in staff. I think they're close to 26, 28 staff members, and they have a very, very robust strategic action plan, and part of that includes diversifying yourself, to your point, Rocci. And from a board perspective, not me necessarily, but my colleagues on the board, it felt very risky. And we had to make what felt very risky financial decisions, investments, and even reputational risks that TLC could. TLC has been around for 40 years, but has largely had a predominantly white membership base, and so there was a strong risk that it wouldn't be well received. But I think in taking that risk, not only have we seen the growth of the size of the organization, but we've seen a tremendous growth in the impact of the organization. And TLC's partners are not just other conservation organizations. It's other organizations that have issues that intersect with what TLC is serving. So I think that it is important to take risks. I think it is important to be intentional in taking those risks and really make sure that it aligns with your mission and your vision as an organization.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you so much. Gabe, I'd like for you to close this out and tell us a little bit about, give us an example of using your personal power, your organizational power to move things forward.
Thank you, Gail. I would encourage folks, everybody in this room, I think when doing this work, and I think Rocci and Mavis had really, really great examples, and I think I would attempt to kind of capstone this. But everybody in the room is more powerful than they realize. Everybody's here, and I believe everybody is really seeking a collective, better world. We're at a really unique time in our global environments where there's a lot of momentum behind this work. This will benefit all of us. I encourage folks not to be caught in the vernacular, as language is important, but this work looks so many different ways. And kind of referencing what Rocci mentioned, intentionality. So looking at, really looking at who's showing up, how people are showing up. Everybody has a power in this space to do this, to seek education, to seek out relationships, and just start showing up in communities. Go to events. Put yourself out there a little bit. I know that's not fun at times, but you know, in the long run, it's going to better your organization, yourself. Many of us, I'm sure all of us, have been putting ourselves out there for decades in spaces like this. So I think no matter where you kind of sit in your kind of traditional Western hierarchy of organization, I think everybody has power to connect, power to empower other communities, and power to seek that education that will benefit your organization and yourself, kind of in that broader run. So that wasn't a specific example, Gail, but I really think this, you know, this is the way that our environmental movement, this is the direction that we're headed. And so I think we're all here encouraging people to kind of jump on the train or jump on the canoe a little bit.
Thank you so much, Gabe. I'd like to thank our three panelists today, Mavis, Rocci, Gabe. They all brought such unique perspectives, but yet there was a unifying thread. I heard intentionality. I heard risk-taking. Sometimes that means shaking up your board. I heard ways that we show up in the community, but remember, we are all here for the service of elevating community conservation. That approach is important. It will bring along with it diversity, inclusion, equity. And if we take some of this forward, we are going to spread our message twice as fast, because remember, we have twice as much land to conserve in the next few years. So we can't be on the slow train anymore. We can't be on the, we got to find someone who's just like us before we can move forward train. We need to be on the train that has open doors and everyone's welcome on, because everyone brings something. And when we get to our destination, that will never end. We'll all be together still conserving the thing that no more of it is being made, our precious land. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for talking with us this morning about your intentions, your risk-taking, your personal power, how you show up in this world, and how you want to encourage others to show up in this world of conservation. Thank you.
Not done yet. A little more time. So thank you, Gail, and thank you to our fabulous, fabulous panelists. And now, to close this morning's presentation and to give you a preview of what to expect at tomorrow morning's plenary, please welcome the Alliance's President and CEO, Andrew Bowman.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'll keep this short so we can get on to our first workshops. Let me first say that I want to say welcome to New Orleans, and I want to say thank you all for making the trip to be here and to be together at Raleigh after 3 years of a difficult hiatus. I hope you were as moved and energized as I was by that last panel. What an incredible group of leaders. Thank you so much. I want to thank Rocci, Mavis, Gabe, and Gail. Thank you for moderating a really stimulating and very important panel to start off Raleigh. Just really fantastic. The insights of this panel are important because it's critical that land trusts center their work in their communities. The examples our panelists provided and the inspiration they gave us, they're all concrete examples of the power of doing this work the right way. We need these examples as a growing number of land trusts seek to demonstrate their commitment to serving all people in their service territories. And again, you really inspired us. I want to note, just briefly, the Alliance is committed to providing training, tools, and resources to support land trusts as they go down this path. Tomorrow, during the morning plenary, you will hear from Jennifer Miller Herzog. Jennifer is our Chief Program Officer, and that's a new position at the Land Trust Alliance that we created this past year. As the title suggests, Jennifer oversees all of the Alliance's programmatic work, including our education and conservation defense teams, our field staff, and our climate change work. And she is also charged, I should say, with establishing a brand new department around community-centered conservation at the Land Trust Alliance. This includes hiring staff dedicated to that department and to advance this essential work. So Jennifer's going to talk about what we plan to offer through that department and some really exciting initiatives that we have going on. Tomorrow morning, you're also going to get a chance to meet our Scholars for Conservation Leadership. It's a very impressive group of young people that I've had the chance to start to get to know over the last day or so, and they are, in fact, the future of our movement. Tomorrow morning, you're also going to hear from Colette Pichon-Battle, a very moving speaker who is a generational native of Bayou Liberty, Louisiana. You will not want to miss her presentation. So that's it. I want to say thank you. Have a wonderful rally. We'll see you around the next couple days.